I always think of it like dancing. And so if you are dancing with somebody and you both know the steps, then it's a lot easier to dance. And culture is this way that everybody has a sense for how other people in the organization are going to move or how they're going to make decisions.
Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening.
This episode is brought to you by On-Demand Leadership. Take your executive team up to the next level with our flagship group coaching sessions. Call us, On-Demand Leadership. You won't be disappointed.
Today's episode, we are going to talk about culture in terms of you don't have one.
That makes it easy. End of podcast.
So let's get into, let's first start talking about just to get everybody on the same page, what is a culture?
Like a personality of a company. It is one or two values that pass two barriers. One, there's consensus, which means a critical mass of your employees believe this is actually the value that best represents the company. Two, there's conviction, which means not only can they identify the value, but they believe it accurately depicts the company.
Yeah, I would say that it's how people feel things should be done.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's only a finite array of these.
And there's a hierarchy.
Yeah. So for example, innovation is a cultural value. Teamwork is a cultural value. Protecting the organization's reputation is a cultural value. Tradition is a cultural value that sometimes happens to be at odds with innovation. We could go on. There's maybe 14, 15 or so.
It depends on the typology.
Depending on what you're looking at.
Yeah.
But there's not 100 values. There's maybe 12, 13, 14 in the whole universe. And your company has these in various array throughout the organization.
It's kind of like a fingerprint.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes a personality. It's described as a personality of a company. But what you and I see, and you're doing a lot of measurement inside companies, is we see companies that don't have any consensus around a single value or two. They actually have a number of different parts of the organization believing in different values. And so you survey, for example, a hospital, and the maintenance department believes safety is the top value, not of their department, of the whole hospital.
But it is for their department. Like it may safety may not actually be a value for the other departments.
Yeah. Yeah. But then you ask accounting and theirs is ethics. And then
they'll think that's for the whole organization.
They'll think it's for the whole organization.
Meanwhile, the maintenance people are not thinking about ethics.
Yeah. Meanwhile, teamwork is what the nurses think. And meanwhile, high performance is what the executive team thinks. And every group believes that about the whole organization. But when you poll the organization, there's no coherent or unifying culture. And so that is what we see most of all, is we see, and it's not quite as bad as it sounds, there will be something to build from. And so you'll be able to take all these different pieces that we're seeing in an organization. And I mean, I've sat through you doing this a bunch of times, and you're able to tell the executives, look, the theme, even though it's not consensus, even though not all departments believe it, and there's not conviction everywhere, is teamwork or whatever, innovation. And it's close. And with a little work, you could firm that up to actually be more clearly your culture. And then we have to sometimes explain why they want a culture. And so tell them some of the reasons that it's beneficial for an organization to have a culture.
I always think of it like dancing. And so if you are dancing with somebody and you both know the steps, then it's a lot easier to dance, and you're probably not going to have some damage on your toes at the end of it. And culture is this way that everybody has a sense for how other people in the organization are going to move or how they're going to make decisions. And so you're able to actually dance together. And the outcome of that is that you have better coordination, because that's what that is. And then more efficiency, because you're not all running in different directions or stepping on each other when you're doing things, or working in odds with each other because you think you should behave this way and they think they're behaving some other way that's counterproductive. And so because of those two elements, and because like when you know the steps, you don't have to talk.
Yeah.
And so you're actually able to get more things done because you're not running around having to tell people what the steps are. And so for all those reasons, you wind up having higher performance because you have a strong culture.
Yeah. 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 As you were talking, I was thinking about, you remember the police chief, our old friend, he's police chief near Austin. And one night, middle of the night, one of his relatively new officers pulls somebody over and then realizes this is actually a drug courier, and ends up seizing, it's some huge number, like $110,000, like cash was in the back of the car. And so the guy counts it, and then he calls for backup to have it counted. And then he asks for a third independent count when the money actually hits the evidence locker. And so the chief in the morning found out about the story. And before the guy went off shift, he's like, hey, why did you count this 3 times? And the patrol officer said, well, like, you're always saying to do the right thing. And I felt like that was the right thing. And when he tells the story, he says, then I threw my arm around him and I gave him a big old hug. And I said, that's exactly what I wanted you to do. And that's the value of ethics. That's what ethics is, a cultural value. And the way that it serves you is that in that sense, literally, but also metaphorically, it answers questions that pop up on the side of the highway at 2 a.m. when
so
nothing else is around. Yeah.
Right.
It answers the question for people, for employees, what should I do? And it's not really. And
even if they don't get it exactly right, they're probably not going to be devastatingly off. And if you, like, we've been in other places where, ethics was the key value. And, they'd be like, so why'd you do that? And then the person would explain it, and then they'd understand how they got there, and they'd be like, all right.
Yeah. 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 So the point of this podcast is most companies don't have a single unified culture, meaning there's not, if you took a random selection of your employees, which, we do all the time. Now, ours isn't usually random. It's usually everybody we can get. But if you take a random selection of your employees, they're not going to be able to return to you the same value as being the highest priority value in the organization. And it's not going to have conviction, meaning a strong feeling everywhere. And it doesn't even have to be everywhere. It just needs to be in a critical mass across the organization. You're going to end up getting a lot of values popping up, and then you're going to have to do a little work.
Yeah. So what happens, I think it's worth having this conversation. So what happens when you don't have a strong culture, which means you don't have consensus and conviction across all departments, everybody in the organization, however you want to say that, is that basically then you randomly will get a department leader who is actually pretty good. And so they start doing the things like reward and punishment and communication and setting up things within their department, within their power, that basically reinforces the values that they think are right. And how they derive that is probably from past experience. And so this is how we do things. And so, And then because everybody has different experiences and has a different value hierarchy, then you get randomly another manager in another department. And then all of a sudden you have two departments that are actually working in opposition to each other. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but it can be the case. And now you've got like basically warring departments. And it's just this, it happens because you had a weak culture in the first place, or you had a culture where you didn't have any sort of conviction behind the beliefs.
Right.
And so then you get lucky in a sense that you get these individuals who come in and usually these are the departments that are actually running really well. Yeah. And they become these little fiefdoms. Yeah. And
they have little baby culturettes.
Yeah.
But if you're the CEO, they may not be moving in the direction you want them to be moving in. That's right. I got my one part doing this, my other part.
Right. Yeah. And so it's kind of, I don't know who said this, but if you don't tell the story, somebody else will tell the story for you. Well, if you don't set the culture, then somebody else is going to do it. And it may be a lot of somebody else's, and it may be very different. And then you don't get the beautiful coordination and efficiency that we were talking about with the dance.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about, we sometimes conceptualize culture as in a 2x2 matrix where you have consensus and conviction. And so that makes 4 quadrants, whereas Cindi mentioned you have consensus and conviction. That's a strong culture. You don't have either. That's a weak culture. You have little places in your company, departments, where they believe we do have a culture here and this is it. And then another one believes we have a culture here and this is it. Then that means you have conviction, but not consensus. And that can be a warring culture.
We call it a warring.
Yeah. Or different parts of your organization are at odds with each other, and what they believe is the most important value for the organization. And then the last quadrant is that you have consensus, but not conviction. And that's an example of where you go to great lengths to put a value everywhere, like teamwork. And then,
but there's nothing that ever reinforces it. In fact, you might even have policies that basically reward individuals.
That's right.
Right. So
we have teamwork, but you're all getting paid individual bonuses.
Right.
And so people can identify in a survey, the value is teamwork. That's what they say. So there's consensus because it's plastered everywhere, but there's no conviction because nobody feels like that's actually
or they're literally being motivated
the opposite way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I was talking about with this emerging warring culture is like, usually that's not going to start with a strong culture. That's going to start with a weak culture and possibly even a vacuous culture where you don't have both things happening. You don't have the consensus or you don't have the conviction. And so then you get these individuals, it's like, it's a void of leadership. Yep. And so then you get these managers who come in and.
Could be anything. Could be they read a book, they heard a podcast. Not that we're opposed to that, but right. Or I went to this seminar and the value should be innovation.
Or they just had a really good boss previously and they know that it's helpful, right? Like one of the things, so we talked about like the good things about culture for an organization, but the good thing about culture for people is for the actual individuals within the organization is all we all want to know is what do we need to do in order to be successful? Yeah. And culture, when people understand what an organization's culture is, that's communicating. This is what you need to be successful. Yeah. Yeah. And so, at least it's part of that equation. And it's very helpful. It makes things much more predictable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's where, like, you've always mentioned it as you've used the word, it's a coordinating mechanism, which it takes a minute to think your way around that. But leaders can't be everywhere. And one of the benefits.
You don't want them to be everywhere anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the benefits of a culture is that it does provide a way to still highlight how we want people to act and what we want the company, how we want the company to be oriented in making decisions.
So I got a good story. Mom, stop listening.
I know this is going to be good.
So in my family, you could say that both of my grandfathers probably, at least partially, their death is you could hang on cigarette smoking. And so
Did your grandfather smoke?
Oh, both of them did.
Back in the day, I guess everybody did. So,
and both of them had some problems related to that.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, it was pretty taboo in my family
to smoke.
Yeah.
Because these two guys died.
Yeah. And died young. And so both my parents felt like
that's why you fed the cigarettes to the billy goats at the zoo.
And that's why they didn't care. So I used to actually take the cigarettes. I was very little, like, under the age of 7 at this point in time. Actually, I was younger than that because I couldn't write anything. So I would take the cigarettes out of the arcade and break off the filters and feed them to the billy goat because billy goats love.
Of course.
Yeah, they
What's
love
not
it.
to like? They'll eat your shoe.
Tobacco.
They'll certainly
that's
eat
true.
tobacco.
They'll eat everything. So, but they really. And so I was trying to make friends with this one billy goat who had like a huge rack, and
that's horns for all you city people.
Yeah, that's true. That could seem like something else. And so I would leave a note, and I would think that I had explained cigarettes aren't good for you, and so they've gone to the billy goat. Now I didn't know how to write, so my mother would get these notes and then have to reimburse people for the cigarettes that I had fed to the billy goat. And I never got in trouble for any of this because my family actually really didn't
it was within the value
care.
set.
Yeah. And so anyway, at some point, my most immediate older sister, at about 9 years old apparently, decided to take up cigarette smoking.
Yeah.
Because she's also around these businesses and there are cigarettes. I mean, there's cigarettes everywhere. Sure. It's not hard. It's also the 70s. So 70s like not people. Hard to find cigarettes.
Nerds, you got to Google what the 70s were like.
No 18-year-old requirement, and they're in vending machines.
That's right.
So, and so she decided that she was going to take up smoking because it was pretty cool. And it was my brother who found out. And nobody ever told my parents. To this day, neither of them ever knew that she smoked cigarettes. And my brother basically just got a hold of her and was like, we don't do that. And he is the oldest out of all of us. And they were pretty tight. And so she stopped smoking cigarettes. Otherwise, she'd have a hell of a habit because she started at 9 years old.
Yeah.
So
it's a good example.
Yeah. And so that's what happens is like you're in an organization and people have a belief. This is how we do things here.
Yeah.
And
that's a culture when widely shared.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when they see somebody who comes in and then doesn't do that, they'll correct you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the point of this episode, and we'll continue the culture discussion in future episodes, but the point of this episode is you want an organizational culture to be strong, but most companies don't have one for the reasons that we've discussed.
While they think that they do.
That's a very important point. And if you're a CEO listening, we're willing to bet that you actually don't have a unified culture, but you're not that far off.
Yeah.
If you're a manager, you possibly feel like you have a culture in your little group, but you may not be actually pushing in the same direction as your company.
Or if you look around, you might realize you're not all pushing in the same direction. Because I think even managers are subject, people have experiences before they enter, a particular organization. And generally that's the case with managers.
Yeah.
And even if it's a different experience with like maybe somebody in the organization and then they got promoted up to management themselves, like they have usually some experiences and they can think, well, of course, this is just how things get done.
Yeah. All right, nerds, that's it for this episode. We'll definitely talk more about culture in future episodes. Till then.
If you found this conversation helpful.
Oh, yeah. You better do something about it.
Yeah.
Better start clicking some crap, nerds.
Yep. So some of the crap you can click, yes, the subscribe, like, share.
Leave some comments. Let's go, people.
All right.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Management Muse. We are a podcast / YouTube channel that we hope is entertaining and educational. If you are on YouTube, we would appreciate you subscribing and maybe leaving a comment and a like. If you are on any of the podcasts listening to this, we would appreciate stars, following, comments, all the good stuff. We want to say thank you to Sarah and Rebecca. And then just as a last minute reminder, we also want to mention that we are management and communication professionals working in the field, but also have degrees that back us in science. All that being said, we are talking in generalities on this podcast. We do not actually know your particular situation. So proceed with common sense and maybe a little bit of experimentation on your end. And we hope that you make the world a more beautiful place by making work a more enjoyable place. See you next time on Management Muse.